here's the thing. I felt like it would be very disrespectful to have 100 and whatever people come together and I didn't have any PowerPoint. So I do have a PowerPoint because I know it is a moral responsibility of every speaker to have a PowerPoint. However, I am not a very organized person. So if you find that I'm showing the PowerPoint, but it actually doesn't relate to what I'm saying, just realize I did that out of respect for you. But I had to respect myself also, which is kind of a lot of what QPI is about. I want to have a lot of respect for you, but not change who I am. So I'm going to have Kirsty, who some of you can see if you're looking at the panel. She's going to show the PowerPoint, and I will try and follow along with it, which Carol Edwards, who you can't see, made for me because I also cannot really make a PowerPoint. And on top of it, I just want to say that we're having some kind of a communications training today in our office. And the first thing we had to read was how to structure your Zoom so that you would be seen well. So I now am completely insecure that I got all the wrong lighting and everything wrong. So you all will have to be really patient with me, and I will try to match up to the way that your leadership has presented this because they've presented everything. So we say QPI, which is, okay, so step one, QPI stands for Quality Parenting Initiative. So you see that little I there with those people in the heart? That is a little I because we wish every day we had never called it Quality Parenting Initiative. We wish we had called it Quality Parenting or Quality Parenting International or anything other than initiative, because people in child welfare, and actually most bureaucracies now, think initiative and they think, if I can only wait this out for 6 months, they will forget about this initiative and they will let me go on to doing my regular work. But that's not what QPI is. It's not a few changes. It is not 3 different activities we're going to engage in, but then we forget because we had a terrible incident which resulted in bad publicity. It is a completely different way of thinking about child welfare, or ordinarily I would say it's completely different, but your leadership has just emphasized the basis for QPI. So maybe it's the same to you now. So now I can go to my next slide, which Kirsty is showing for me. And I do know what that slide is because this is the most important slide. Everything that your leadership just said is exactly what I want to say. The most important thing about QPI is relationships. And what we're trying to do is say this. Child welfare is a bureaucracy. Bureaucracy thrives on uniformity, consistency, a lack of relationships, a lack of individuality, making sure we can complete our activities and turn out our product as efficiently as possible. So like the main example of a bureaucracy to me is the Registry of Motor Vehicles. I'm in Massachusetts, the Department of Motor Vehicles. Granted, it's not efficient, but the idea is to do the same for every single person. And yet children, that is the antithesis of what children thrive on. Children thrive on people recognizing their individuality, and they thrive on relationships. So we have that tension. What we are trying to do in QPI is to say, our goal is to have children reach their full potential. And we know from research and from common sense, and I really love what Michael said about when he was growing up. Mostly I say QPI is what my great-grandmother could have told me. My grandmother told me, not to exclude my grandfather and my great-grandfather, but we're a very strong woman family, so I'm going to rely right now on my grandmother. They would have told you children need parents. Children need mothers. If you do a great job in making your child feel like you and all the people around them get along and care about one another, and especially care about them, and know that they are the most important person in the world, they'll do really well. So we really want to build on relationships. So when we started doing this, I think it's funny that Natalia says that I came back from Russia, because that is true. I was on my way back from Russia when I stopped in Connecticut, but I don't actually live in Russia. So anyway, when we started this, we thought it was going to go through in a very straightforward way. But of course, COVID has intervened and is intervening again. And in an odd way, I think COVID has made us see how much more important this is rather than less, because I think we all right now see how important our relationships are to us. And when those relationships are being taken away, even in part, we see how painful it is and stressful it is. For me, I just saw my kids, but I hadn't seen my kids for 8 months. That was a huge thing to be separated. So it makes me feel even more about how harsh it is when child welfare takes children away from the relationships they have continually. So taking children from the first relationship from their birth parents, which is necessary, I hope, in every case in which it happens for their own safety, but then continually disrupting relationships. The impact of COVID, I think, has brought home to every one of us what happens when relationships are disrupted. So we can go to the next slide. This is really hard for me. So I have to at least look at the panel because I can't see if anyone is hearing me or not. So maybe put it in the panel. Thank you very much. So Diane is nodding to make me feel better. Thanks. So
I can say amen if you want me to on occasion.
Yes. That would make the Louisiana people feel at home too. That would be good. So we think the most important relationship for children, starting with it's almost the only relationship for a child when they're first born, and then moving on throughout their life, is the parenting relationship. If we are going to have children come into our care, we have got to be able to promise them that they will have excellent developmentally, sorry about that LY dropping over there, developmentally informed parenting all the way through. We cannot say we're rescuing you from your family because they can't care for you, and we're going to guarantee you at least 3 meals a day, plus probably snacks, and a great place to sleep. Or as I think I've told people this story before, as one young person said to me when I asked her about foster care, she said it was fine. It was like living with a babysitter for 4 years. We cannot do that to children. We have to promise them excellent developmentally informed parenting while they are healing, because they won't heal without that. And their parents won't heal unless they can have the confidence that while their children are not with them and while they are doing their important work of healing, somebody else is parenting them in an excellent way. It is really important that we provide that to children. And I believe, as you'll see in another slide, I think it is really, really important that the general public know that that is our goal and that is what we're going to do. Because if they don't, it makes it so difficult for parents of children in the system, because they have to, and I'm sure Shauna will talk to you about this a little more, they have to always be wary and feel, what is happening to my child? How can I have any trust? Whereas if they can believe the person they're with loves them, cares about them, but does not want to steal them from me, wants to see them thrive, they can go ahead and thrive themselves. So I cannot overemphasize this, because we have not made excellent developmentally, with the LY in the wrong place, informed parenting the core of our system. We have made risk aversion the core of our system, making sure that no child ever gets hurt under any circumstance, making sure that we are never in the paper for any reason, making sure that the court is going to be satisfied with every decision. When we do that, we restrict the ability of parents to parent. When we, on the other hand, say, you know what, when I was a kid, I went and played on a swing. And when I played on that swing, some other kid pushed the swing and knocked out my front teeth. And that was okay because I got to play in a swing. I got to see what happened. It was a really bad thing, but it would have been a much worse thing if I were never allowed to go and do things that normal kids do. If we can say that and say our children deserve the same, they deserve to be able to take a little risk. And our parents cannot parent unless we will say, we back you up when you take a reasonable risk that every other parent takes. Not you're ridiculous, not you're negligent, but you let your children go on sleepovers. You treat these children who are in your home the same as if they were your children. And not meaning the same, meaning identical, but meaning the same, meaning caring. If we can't do that, then we're really depriving our children. So I hope you can understand that is the most important principle of QPI. To do this, and I can have another slide now. I feel like my PowerPoint is going pretty well. I want you to put in the chat, yeah, you're sticking to the PowerPoint.
Yeah, you're doing great.
Thank you. Thank you. Very
Amen,
good.
Carole.
Thank you. There you go. See, this is why I carry around a little group of supporters with me at all times. So we can't do this without more families who are willing and able to be excellent parents to the children in our system. That is a really big thought, because I was just talking to someone in another state about kids sleeping in offices, which is how this whole project started, because kids were sleeping in offices, and we sued the state of Florida to try to stop that. And we worked with Michael's former boss, George Sheldon, saying, well, why don't we come up with a new plan? But this group was saying, kids are sleeping in offices, but we have a lot of families enrolled. We have a lot of families licensed. On paper, we have a lot of the right people. No, I'm sorry, we have a lot of people. But what they didn't have, and what we often do not have, is the families who are willing and able to be excellent parents to the children in our system. So some people are willing. I think I would be willing, but I really don't think I would be able. You have to be a really extraordinary person to be unselfish enough and have the time and have the commitment to be a parent to someone else's child. I'm not saying there's no people like that. I think there are a lot of people like that out there, but we have to have the right people. They have to be willing. They have to not be saying, what I'm in this for is adoption, and I don't really care about the birth family. I just want to get a kid as quickly as I can. We have to make them able, because in part, some people are inherently not able. Like I travel all the time, or used to. I would not be able. But some people are potentially able, but they just need more training and more support to be excellent parenting to the children in our system. We do not need people who would be excellent parents to perfect children. We do not need people who would be excellent parents to children who have never suffered trauma. We don't need people who will be excellent parents to children who are never going to make a mistake, take a risk, argue with them, rebel. What we need is excellent parents for children in our system. And I so believe, based on the experience that we've had, and based on the incredibly wonderful people I have met across the country, including some who you will meet today, that there are those people there. We just are not necessarily enabling them to do it. And we're not necessarily telling them what it is that we want them to do. And I'll talk about that in a second. My goal, my personal goal. So stepping back and out of the PowerPoint, I'm actually a lawyer. I am actually a children's rights systems reform lawyer, and I've done litigation all across the country, literally from Maine to California, over issues relating to kids and child welfare and juvenile justice. And my goal as a lawyer who did this, and as a person who has seen this system, is I want to end unnecessary system-inflicted trauma. And if I know every child in our system, quite honestly, every child in the juvenile justice system as well as plenty of others, has experienced trauma. If they have not experienced trauma, honestly, they should not be in our system. And that's why they come in. But we do not have to inflict more trauma. When people get sick and they go in the hospital, we do not have to give them staph infections. We do not have to spread disease. And when they come into our system, they are experiencing at a minimum the trauma of disrupted relationships. We do not need to continue to disrupt those relationships. We need to undo all of that. So that's the purpose of QPI. I know this is sounding a lot like I'm telling you and you agree with this, but what are we going to do about it? So I'm hoping that the next slides will tell you what we're going to do about it. So the first step you've already heard here today, we need a commitment by a child welfare system to fully support excellent parenting and strong relationships by putting the needs of the children first. Now, ordinarily, I talk about this a lot, but you've just heard two outstanding leaders say, this is what the commitment of our child welfare system is. This is what we want to do. So yeah, thanks, chiming in. I love that. So I am not worried. You have a full commitment. We worked this out for a full year through COVID, through floods, through everything else, because of the commitment to support excellent parenting and strong relationships. So we're going to go by this, but I wanted to give a shout out on this slide because I didn't know how excellent you would actually be. Well, I should have, because I want to say your commissioner, I got to about this part in the slide and she was like, I don't need to see any more slides. We're just doing this. So next slide, Kirsty. Kirsty, you're doing so great, by the way, on the slides. I really appreciate it. So here's how we believe, and we have been shown from experience, that we can really get here. The first thing we have to do is set clear expectations for everyone in the system and particularly for our caregivers. So when I talk about this, I don't like to overemphasize caregivers because that makes people who are not directly involved with caregivers, social workers who work with the families, et cetera, think, well, this has nothing to do with me. It's everything to do with you. But it starts with the caregiver in the same way as, let's say you're a basketball team. I usually say football team, but I actually feel football is dangerous. So I don't want to talk about that anymore. Let's say you're a basketball team. And the coaches don't say, what does this have to do with me? You're talking about players. The managers don't say that. The recruiters don't say that. The whole team focuses around the people who are in the field. And like it or not, it is the caregivers. I say foster parents, but when I say foster parents, it's just because I talk really fast, but not fast enough to in every sentence say foster parents, kinship caregivers, unrelated kin, guardians. I'm talking about whoever is caring for a child who is away from their birth parent in the system. We have not set clear expectations for them. Now, there's a lot of reasons why we haven't done that. Part of the reason is we're afraid if we set clear expectations, this job is so hard, no one will do it. So we have to settle for okay expectations. That is, you keep the kids safe, you feed them, you don't abuse them, you get them to school, and we're good with that. I think this is undermining our ability to get excellent people because excellent people don't want to just do that. That's a boring job. A good job and an interesting job is the job that we want them to do, which is love and care for this child as if they were our own while you are supporting the birth parents in their reunification and the social workers in the work that they are doing in communicating with the courts and advocating for the child. A lot of things. It's a hard, challenging job, but there are a lot of people who can do it, and we will get the right people if we help them know that. And then I want to go on to say that means clear expectations for everyone else in the system too. So we need to know if we do not need to be giving mixed messages to caregivers, and we don't need to be giving mixed messages to everyone else. If these expectations are going to be decided by you all in Connecticut, and I'm going to talk about that at the end of this presentation. But if you all in Connecticut decide, and I know you're going to because I'm looking right at two people who are going to help with this decision, that an expectation is that caregivers are going to have some relationship with the birth family. It may be a strong and
Amen.
mentoring relationship. It may be less, but there's going to be some relationship to the extent that is possible and safe. And in almost every case, it's possible and safe. Then we can't have half of the people saying, well, don't bother talking to them if you don't want to, or don't talk to them until I've already worked this out for you, or you can talk to them in 8 months. An expectation is an expectation. It has to permeate the whole system and it has to be supported by the whole system. And that is why those of you who are responsible for what I call case management, what am I supposed to be calling it, Natalia, in Connecticut? What I
Ongoing
call on,
services,
yeah, those of you
responsible
responsible.
investigations.
This is why you're here, because ongoing services are the people who really communicate. The person who recruits the foster parent, they communicate one thing, but it's what you're doing and saying that communicates to them. And if an expectation is we expect you to be a full respected partner, which is the only way we can get and keep people doing this job, then
true.
that is on ongoing
Mhm.
services to be doing also. So this is everyone's job. It's on the court. When the court says, I don't want to hear anything from the caregiver, that is really not QPI-ish, and it's not holding up to these expectations. We have to communicate those expectations to everyone, which is really hard because those expectations are not built into the DNA of child welfare. We have to do, what do you do it like recombinant DNA? I just made that up. That we have to restructure. So it is now in our DNA that our caregivers are doing the critical job and they are going to have a clear expectation and we're going to support them. And then we have to, in order to do that, we have to realign the system because any place I have ever gone, there's a lot of consistency on what they think excellent parenting looks like, but there's always barriers that people can say, well, that's fine. We could do that, but how about this policy? Well, your leadership is right here to say, if there are policies people are identifying that are standing in the way of this, they're going to have to, may take a while, but they are going to have to change. So now I can go to the next slide, I think. So this is what we're going to do, and Natalia is going to give you a clear schedule for this, but this is session 1 of QPI is just letting you know what's going on. Session 2 is going to take place in your super regions. Anybody feel free to correct me if I use the wrong word, but we're going to be breaking up by super regions and having conversations in the 2nd and 3rd week of December about what does great parenting look like in the context of child welfare. Now, this is different from what great parenting looks like, I might say, because great parenting for me, I have 2 children and they're birth children, as it happens. Great parenting for me meant I should be able to work really well with their dad. I should be able to care about them. I should be able to make good decisions for them. It did not mean I have to cooperate with the whole team. It did not mean I have to involve people who otherwise I had never met, but I have to bring in, or with whom I had historical conflicts, but I had to overlook them for the benefit of the children. It did not mean I had to do court reports and advocate for them. It's much harder in child welfare. So we're going to brainstorm what would that look like in child welfare, and we're going to do that with as many representatives of as many facets of the system as possible, including consumers, meaning children and birth parents. And how do we know when that's happening? How can we measure that? So that's the next thing we're going to do. No idea about my time. This is another thing that I'm really bad at. So, no, but I'm good. Okay, so next slide, Kirsty. We're going to communicate these statements. We're going to come back together in a central meeting statewide. I think probably January, I believe is the
Yes,
schedule.
January.
Thank you. And we're going to talk about how can we, in one sentence, in an elevator speech, what we call the brand statement, how can we rebrand this so that what do we want everyone to think of when they think of parenting and child welfare? That's kind of confusing to explain, but we need a quick way. That is our motto, as I said, our brand. So just as the brand of some, let's take, do you guys have Target? You have Target. Target to me is a really clear brand. I know if I go into Target, I know what kind of thing I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a dress for my daughter's wedding. But on the other hand, I am if I'm looking for clothes, I'm looking for things that are relatively inexpensive, but they're going to be kind of cute so that I can say to people when they go, oh, I really like that, I can say Target and appear to be that person who is very clever in finding a low cost yet stylish solution.
Oh,
And I know it's going to appeal to me and to my daughter who's really into clothes. She's going to be able to find something. I know I'm going to be able to find home. I just know what Target is. I don't know what foster parenting is in that way. People need to know what foster parenting is in the same way. And to be honest, it would be helpful if they knew what case management was in the same way. They need to be able to think, oh, you're a foster parent. That means you are what? A fully respected partner in the system. You are a person who's helping kids reunify. You are helping kids reach their potential. Right now, what they're thinking is, wait, you're someone who gets paid to take care of other people's kids. Aren't there a lot of them who are just in it for the money? Or they're thinking, you are a saint. I would never do that. We need to communicate this better. So this is just a quick overview. If you don't understand it, you can put something in the chat. I can't read the chat and talk at the same time, but Brandy can help you. But then let's go to the next slide, which is the most important. Once we know what we want, we have to figure out how are we going to get there. And we're going to go back to the super regions and have each super region, possibly breaking out by offices, but this is getting way above my competence to explain all these different structural
you are
nuances.
on target. You are on target.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
We are going to go back and talk about, here's what we want to do. What's standing in the way? What are some practices or policies that we need to change? What things can we change right away that would get us in this direction? Because again, you may remember about 15 minutes ago, I was talking to you about initiatives. We're kind of all sick of initiatives, partially because we start them and they take like 17 years to complete, after which we have had 7 different administrations. We've all forgotten about them and we never got anything done. So we want to get things done that can be done in 30, 60, 90 days to start with. Some things really take a long time to do. Some things, like a policy on how you answer your phones, like the message that we give to people when we're first recruiting, how we share information. Some things can be done actually quickly. We don't need a huge policy change. We definitely don't need a legislative change. We just need to do them, and then some things we'll work on. Now, you may notice, which is that I keep saying we're going to go back to the super regions, or I've said that twice. That is because the principle of QPI, which is not on the slide, is that the people who are doing the work or receiving the work know how the work should be done and are in the best position to make change. And the further away you are from the work, the less capable you are of making change. So let's take me. I am very far away from the work, but for, I'll say, about 20 years, I made all the change. I do a lawsuit. I know you guys have a lawsuit. I do a lawsuit. I give people the rules. And I had no idea of the unintended consequence of things that seemed to me, sitting here in Gloucester, Massachusetts, or in that case in San Francisco, would be just perfect for Florida. I didn't really know that, well, if you make us do this, we're going to wind up with a mistake. We believe the people who are doing the work should have the main say in how the work is done. And other people can help by implementing, making it really work, figuring out how to get that done. But we really need to hear from people on the line. This is all about the voices of the line. As I said, foster parents, birth parents, youth, social workers, the people who are doing it every day. And that is why, thanks to all your leadership here, we're going back to the regions to really hear. We need as many people as possible to participate in this. We need everyone's voice to be heard. And so my next slide is about some examples of things we did. But the one example, this is the next slide after this, Kirsty. Okay, so this is a bunch of examples, but I'm going to quickly give you the example of comfort calls first, because it just shows you how the system works, how QPI works. So in Louisiana, I know some of you have heard this a million times, and if you came to the National, you heard it 1,000,001 times, but I'll just go over this again. We were starting in Louisiana, in Lafayette, actually, and someone's here from Lafayette to talk about this. And when we started in Louisiana, we met with a group of parents. And I think that the people from Louisiana can tell you this in a little more detail, but they were very angry, resentful at even having to be there, but they worked for something called the Extra Mile, which was a parent advocacy group, and they told them to come. And honestly, I had nothing to do with running Louisiana, but that did not make them hate me any less. They were really like, I was like, I'm just coming here to hear what's going on, but it didn't matter. I had to own it. And the first thing they said is, I cannot believe I could not talk to my child or find out really how well my child was doing for almost a week after they got to the home where they were. I had not been separated from them before. I did make some mistakes, but how come I couldn't hear from them that night to hear they were okay? And I had to think about that and think, yeah, how come? Good question. Anytime my child went away, people would always call and say, how are they? So I said, well, would it make you feel better about the system as a whole if somebody just had called you when they got to the foster home and said your child is okay, and maybe in some cases, do you want to talk to them? Maybe that's not a good idea, but do you want to talk to the person who's taking care of them? Is there anything you want to tell them? They were like, yeah, if somebody would have done that, I would have felt some respect for myself as a parent, and I wouldn't have been so angry with myself and felt so out of it. So I took this under advisement and we talked about it a little bit. And then coincidentally, I went to another part of Louisiana and talked to a group of youth. And the first thing that those kids said, this girl was 18 and she was removed from home when she was 6. She sort of went back and forth, which is another thing that we don't even want to talk about. But she said, what are y'all thinking about? You take us out of our homes in the middle of the night and drive us out in the country, Michael, I want to say, someplace in the country we've never been. We have no idea where we're going. Last person who ever knew who our parents were leaves and says goodbye. And then we never talk to them. We don't know where we're going. We don't know if anyone knows who we are. We don't know if we're kidnapped. Couldn't you just let us call and talk to our parents? Not to mention everyone was all upset when we left. So here were two customer groups saying, you are not providing us with good customer service. You're not doing what we want, and you want us to change, but you're not changing. So we were able to say to everyone, what do you think? And everybody thought, yeah, I think that's okay. So we implemented in Louisiana. You'll hear more about this from people from Louisiana. We implemented in Louisiana. It became state law in Florida. Michael, you'll be happy to know that. It became state law in Minnesota, and people from Minnesota are here to talk about it again, where it became policy all over the country from those two people being able to have their voice. So this was a long speech to say, it is worth people's time to come. It's honestly worth your time. Just like this year, it was worth your time to vote. You always think, so what? One more vote, one more vote. No, it is worth people's time. So we're going to really encourage you to participate. This is just a list of a bunch of other things that we have changed. We have changed the way that the amount of information foster parents receive and when they receive it. Foster parents complain, you will not tell me anything about birth parents. We totally support birth parents' privacy, but we kind of have to know what kids have gone through if we're going to do a good job. Normalcy and prudent parent, again, this was complaints from some people in Florida, which the then secretary took to his testimony in Congress and then became the prudent parent law. We've changed the way kids move from home to home. We've changed who participates in decision making, etc. You can read, and one thing I know from my communications training that I haven't had yet is I should not read you a slide, so I'm not going to. Okay, the last sentence is going to be results. The last slide, Christy, is going to be results. So here is what we are seeing in the sites. I did not give my usual introduction, which is we started with 3 sites in Florida, more or less started with 3 sites in Florida when we realized we had to do site work. We expanded to like 6 more the next year. We're in now that we have Connecticut, we're in about 90 sites across the country. Connecticut is one of 4 states will be one of 4 states where this is statewide. Oh, actually 5 because Nevada, it's statewide in Nevada too. So we're in Florida, statewide in Louisiana, statewide in Nevada, statewide in California. We have a number of people in Minnesota. You will hear from Philadelphia where we are expanded. So in all of those places, we have not done great evaluation, but we have done okay evaluation to find out that no one has lost families. They've all gotten more families and many more of the families that we need who are willing to do the work that we need done. We're seeing our teaming better. We're seeing that foster parents feel that the agency, that they are part of the team, not fighting the team. And now we're doing much more work with birth parents. And I hope Shauna will agree that birth parents are feeling more like part of the team. As a result, we're having much better decision making because when everyone is in the room, we have much more information. We have much better ideas. For example, we were working on trying to close a shelter in Clark County and started to have teams. And when we started to bring the mental health people into the team and the parents into the team, we could find places where kids could be staying much more easily. I know you've already done that, so I know you've done a lot of that. We've changed a lot of policies, as you've heard, and legislation. We think everyone's skill level is higher because we are able to, as a national organization, bring in national and international experts to do our training for foster parents because their work is the hardest. They deserve the best information. And this is the most important to me. We're not breaking relationships. We're seeing long-term relationships. And I'm going to end this with this comment and then tell you what's going to happen and actually even give you a couple minutes of a break. The most important thing to me is children are not losing relationships because when they lose their relationships, they lose themselves and they lose their past. So many kids, we don't have as many kids moving from home to home as we used to. I think that's a real success of our system. We have done better, but we have not eliminated that. Well, it is unfortunate when you have to move home to home. Maybe it's fortunate because you're moving back home or you're being adopted. But if you lose the relationship with those people who were caring for you and loving you, you lose yourself. You lose yourself because you start to believe I wasn't really deserving of their love and I didn't really have it. It was situational. While I was with them, they cared about me. When I wasn't with them, they weren't getting paid in many cases, they didn't care about me. It's really hard to understand that this was something done against people's will. They lose their history because so much of our life, and this is Thanksgiving when we can't get together with our family, but my family happens to live around here where I'm living now. And so much of my life and what I know about my life is from the stories that my family tells me about things. Well, now I'm old, so they don't. Now I'm telling things people used to do when they were little, things I tell my children that my cousins and I used to do when we were little, how we took care of them. All of that history is what makes them who they are. And when we break the relationships, we really break that. And we completely eliminate their ability to trust and to engage in relationships themselves. And in the end, what is going to make them successful adults? I don't care about the one foster child who becomes a Rhodes Scholar and goes on to be president of a university. That's not what I really want. What I want is every child to be able to reach their potential. And what does that mean? It means they're going to be able to, just like the discredited Freud used to say, they are going to be able to love and work. And if we can strengthen those relationships, they will become productive, loving family members who have their own children, support other people's children, become foster parents for us and social workers for us in the future. That's what I feel like that we can accomplish if we accomplish this culture shift, you're already 50% of the way there. Maybe you're 75% of the way there. All we're going to do is implement.
Wow,
So,
Carole, you gave us goosebumps of inspiration.
thank you, Michael. See,
Yeah, that's
Michael
awesome.
understands a needy
No,
person. Thank you so
no,
much.
no, you're awesome.
So, thank you.